All right, guys, let's go ahead and get started. I assume you can hear me. Jeff, if you can hear me, give me a thumbs up. All right, awesome. Just want to make sure. All right, so today I'm going to go through perfecting pandemic prospecting. Say that 5 times fast. But before we get into that, I wanted to review a couple of things that are a little bit more pressing. So we'll get to that in a moment, but the agenda for today is how prospecting for new business has changed during COVID-19. We're going to talk about short-term solutions for getting business, long-term solutions for getting business, and what the keys are to success. But the more pressing matters that I wanted to review were issues around multiple offers that we're kind of all finding ourselves in, and the appraisal waiver. And so, before there was such a shortage of inventory, I know I've gone over the appraisal waiver before, but I don't think we've ever had to use it as much as we have lately. So the issue is with these 2 points is that the scarcity of homes and fear of missing out on a home is creating stress and an irrational behavior amongst buyers. And so they are doing things that they normally wouldn't do, but they feel backed into a corner. And so I think that buyers are making decisions that aren't entirely well thought out. And so this creates extreme risk for them because they're the ones that are parties to the contract, but it also creates risk for us, meaning me and you. And the reason is because, like I've said before, everything goes fine until it doesn't. And if a transaction starts to go south on you, then they are going to be looking for someone to blame. And, the last thing you want is a client to say, well, I just did that because my agent told me to. And so this whole multiple offer situation and what they have to do to get the home is creating a lot of stress. So the question is, how can we still protect our client and increase the chances of winning the bid? So there's kind of 2 things at odds with each other. We want to get them into a home, but we don't want them to make decisions that will have long-lasting negative impacts. So, and then how does the appraisal waiver work with a VA and FHA loan? And so just as a reminder that buyers' right to the buyer's waiver of the right to terminate based on the appraisal form is that form that came out a year or 2 ago. And it puts the buyer in a little bit more precarious situation if that home doesn't appraise for the asking price. So I'm going to go into that first. And so here is what the addendum says. So it has this written all over it. Underneath the actual title, it says, use only if the third-party financing addendum is attached to the contract and the transaction does not involve FHA insured or a VA guaranteed financing. So just as a reminder, the FHA guarantees the loan, the VA actually backs the loan. Still, the government has a lot of skin in the game in these 2 loans, and I'll go into why that's important in a moment. But then it says below, right below you put in the property address, the financing described in the third-party financing addendum attached to the contract for the sale of the above referenced property does not involve FHA or VA financing. So it calls it out right there. And so for buyers to sign this, or for agents to suggest that buyers sign this, is a no-no if they have a VA or FHA loan. So JC joined as well, so I've asked him to kind of chime in on this as well. But because I've talked to Trek, I've talked to TAR, I've talked to lawyers, I've talked to JC's talked to lenders that just do VA loans, and their motivation is to close the loan, and so I'm not saying they want us to do anything illegal or unethical, but they have seen these appraisal waivers signed by people that have VA and FHA loans. So that is a no-no. This is a TREC form, and it calls out right here that they can't be used for that kind of loan. Now, if you move to the third-party financing addendum, though, what it does say in the FHA section under 4C, if VA financing is involved and if buyer elects to complete the purchase of an amount in excess of the reasonable value established by the VA, which means the appraisal, buyer shall pay such excess amount in cash from a source which buyer agrees to disclose to the VA and which buyer represents will not be from borrowed funds, except as approved by the VA. So let's just kind of stop right there. All that means is that they can actually purchase a home if it doesn't meet appraisal. They just can't guarantee it from the waiver that we mentioned earlier. So they're going to have to come out of pocket for the cash, and that all the loan amounts and the amount of cash down will have to change. So can a VA and FHA loan purchaser purchase a home that is above appraisal? Yes. It just can't, that money just can't be from a borrowed source, okay? So it then goes on to say, if VA reasonable value of the property is less than the sales price, seller may reduce the sales price to an amount equal to the VA reasonable value, and the sale will be closed at the lower price with proportionate adjustments to the down payment and the loan amount. So all this says is that that if the seller chooses to lower the price, buyer can still move forward with that. So that is not any different than what would happen in a normal case. But what's at issue is that offers aren't being accepted above asking price these days unless an appraisal waiver is signed. There is nothing that guarantees a VA buyer has to go through with the sale, even if they're willing to pay more. They may want to pay more, but there's nothing like that appraisal waiver that they can guarantee in writing that that's going to happen, okay? So I'll go into my thoughts as to why I think that is. I could not get a straight answer as to why that was, by the way. So all any of us are bound to is what that addendum says. And that's what I'm going to go by. So if the addendum says it can't be used for a VA or an FHA loan, we can't do it. But as I mentioned earlier in the third party financing, they can pay more. They just have to come up with the cash for the difference. Okay. So my second point is, however, once an offer is accepted and the appraisal comes in below list price, buyer can pay more. So again, they just can't guarantee it. So this is why I think this is. So government insured and government backed loans don't want buyers to pay more than a home is worth, so they don't allow a guarantee, as we've seen in the appraisal waiver. Okay, so if the government said that this was okay, then their risk is greatly increased, right? So the government guarantees or insures a FHA loan, backs a VA loan. They are very pro-veteran. They are not going to allow a veteran in particular to get into a financial situation they can't get out of. So for them to just unilaterally allow these two kinds of loan purchasers to sign that waiver creates a lot of risk for them. So JC, any further comments or input?
Well, you nailed that on the head, Brad. That's a very good explanation and well said and presented, and that's exactly it. So in short, we obviously cannot tell a VA or FHA buyer that they cannot offer more. They can. However, we just have to make sure that that addendum is not signed, and it's going to require some education on behalf of the buyer's representative, which if you're that person, to educate the seller's representative, because their immediate thought is, I got to get this waiver signed. but they don't recognize the ins and outs. And one of the reasons this is being brought up today is because this obviously is happening, was recently happened on another transaction where they were demanding that it be signed, and it just couldn't. So, but yeah, well said. That's a very good explanation, Brad.
Yeah. So when you think about, I mean, forget the VA and FHA piece about the appraisal waiver for a second. If, you know, in the haste of trying to get a home, let's say it's a conventional loan, and a person feels that their only choice is to pay $20,000 above the list price, and they in haste sign that addendum, and they know they can't get financing for that amount, but they have to come out of pocket for $20,000. They get a week before closing, and they realize they don't have $20,000 and they want to get out. The buyer may think that their only recourse is they're going to lose their earnest money. And to some degree, if the seller doesn't want to press it because they can just turn around and sell the home 100 times over, that may be. But that is not legally the seller's right. So legally, the seller's right is they get the earnest money back and they can sue for non-performance. Okay. Now, I don't know a judge in the country that's going to mandate that a buyer purchase a home that they can't afford, but that wouldn't stop them from assigning punitive damages in the amount of whatever they can afford. So buyers cannot play fast and loose with the rules that we need to become intimately familiar with, because buyers are asking us to do desperate things because they're desperate. So how do we get around this, or how do we really address this? So first, just write the contract with the buyer's sales price that's above list. So if the home is $300,000 and the buyer wants to offer $320,000, and the listing agent says, okay, but you have to sign an appraisal waiver, meaning that, you know, hey, if that home doesn't appraise, you got to come up with a difference. And then you tell them, well, wait, my client has a VA loan. They can't sign that appraisal waiver, right? So just write the contract for the amount of $20,000 above. And as I mentioned earlier, you're going to adjust the cash out of pocket and the loan amount. All right. So it says adjust the cash down, the down payment and the loan amount accordingly. Okay. And then provide proof of funds. So I'm trying to get around a VA and FHA inability to sign that waiver. So you got to think, well, what's the next best thing? Well, as JC mentioned, if in my example, they wanted to pay 20 grand over, if I were the seller's agent, I want to see proof of those funds. And so I'm just trying to find ways where you can create a stronger offer for a person that has these kinds of loans, because a person that has a VA or FHA loan should not be shut out of purchasing the home of their dreams just because they can't sign an appraisal waiver. Okay, so the ability to be able to show the proof of funds, I think, strengthens your offer. Okay, do not write anything in special provisions. Okay, as a blanket rule, don't put anything in there. I'm going to go into that in a second. But I have heard where either the client or the seller's agent wants you to put in special provisions, buyer guarantees $20,000 over list price. You can't do that. That special provisions space, it's really for the client to take that document to a lawyer and say, this is what I want to say. You have to craft the message. Okay, we are not really to type anything in that area, especially in the example I just gave. Okay, and then send an email to the seller's agent expressing that your buyer really wants the house and is willing to pay above list and the difference between that price and the appraisal. So is an email binding? No, but it does provide written documentation that the buyer does want the home. He or she has every intention of paying above ask. They just can't sign an appraisal waiver. Now, does that prevent the buyer from backing out as they normally would be able to? No, it doesn't. But it does communicate urgency and a higher level of certainty for a loan that can't sign that document. Okay, now here's the deal. The seller, even after having done all that, may not want to risk being stuck with a low VA or FHA appraisal anyway, and may take a pass on your buyers. For those that don't understand what I just said, is if in my example, that buyer has a VA loan and they go through with it and the appraisal comes in below the list price, that appraisal amount stays with that home for the next VA buyer or the next FHA buyer for 6 months. Now, that's not to say that someone with a conventional loan can't come forward and that doesn't apply. They go through the same process of getting a new appraisal, and whatever that number is what that number is. But even if the seller in their heart of hearts wants to accept a VA or FHA buyer, they may not want to risk it in this market because that appraisal is going to stick with that home for 6 months. Why is that a big deal, aside from what I just mentioned? Because they can sell that home 100 times over, and a low appraisal is going to put them dead in the water. And I will bet you $1 million that it's probably slightly overpriced anyway. It's probably overpriced anyway. So there's risk in having a third party come in and say, no, it's actually worth 20 grand less, and that number sticks with that home for 6 months. Okay. So here is a note about special provisions. So this is right from TAR. So this is not some random real estate blog that I found on the internet. So it says, what can realtors write in paragraph 11 or special provisions? The short answer, very little. If clients absolutely want or need a special term to be written into their contract, you should advise them to consult an attorney. So I'll say it again, I've said it 1,000 times. Our main job is to unite a willing seller with a willing buyer. So when we get into these areas of trying to play lawyer or trying to determine what's going to pop up on an inspection, or talk about our opinion on foundation matters, or anything else, is getting out of our lane. Okay, so this is not dissimilar from that. So it goes on to say both the Real Estate License Act and the Realtor Code of Ethics prohibits realtors from engaging in the unauthorized practice of law. Unless also a licensed Texas attorney, agents and brokers are crossing the line into the unauthorized practice of law by preparing or drafting a legal document or language for their clients. Okay, so if you put anything other than the word none in there, that is practicing law, because we're crafting language in a contract. The special provisions paragraph provides instructions to only insert factual statements and business details. But what is the difference between a factual statement or business detail and language that could be considered the unauthorized practice of law? So TREC Rule 537.11 B5 provides guidance. It says a license holder may not draft language defining or affecting the rights, obligations, or remedies of the principals, meaning the clients, of a real estate transaction, including escalation, appraisal, or other contingency clauses. In other words, if a party has the right or is obligated to do something under the terms of the contract, an agent or broker cannot draft language changing that right or obligation. Therefore, it would not be considered a factual statement if the language inserted into special provisions requires a party to do something they didn't have to do, or prohibits a party from doing something they could otherwise do under the terms of the contract. So appraisal issues are covered elsewhere in the contract. I've seen people asked to put in lease backs. You don't put anything like that in there. Okay, so there's really not much we can put in special provisions. And so I'm going to research examples of what we can put in there, but But by and large, if you're uncertain, don't put anything in there. All right, so multiple offers. Before I go on, does anyone have any questions, concerns, or comments about the appraisal waiver issues? Okay. All right, so multiple offers and this rat race of trying to get our clients a home. So how do we make multiple offers work? So sometimes in the listing, there are clues as to what might make a compelling offer. Now, mind you, confidentiality is key, and the seller's agent is bound by that confidentiality. He or she's not going to tell you anything, or they shouldn't, with regards to the seller's situation. But sometimes the listing will give off clues, like look at the pictures. Is it cluttered? Do they look like they have to sell? Is the description just, a few sentences strung together? So sometimes you can pick up clues as to what kind of offer you might submit. Train your client to slow it down and not make a hasty decision. Okay, especially this time of year, there is always a shortage of inventory. If they can wait another month or two, they're going to be better off because there's going to be more inventory. But it is very easy. A lot of us got into this business because of the adrenaline rush we get when we're buying and selling homes. I'm guilty as charged, but your clients are going to be in the same situation. And they might get carried away and just be caught up in winning the bid to their own demise. All right, so you will always be up against the seller having too many offers to choose from. Saw somebody post on Facebook on Sunday that their client wanted to put in an offer on a home. Home already had 60 offers. That was since Friday. And so how in the world is it going to be possible for us to stand out? And that is going to be difficult. And that is something you have to communicate to your client. It is going to be difficult to stand out because they're just faced with too many offers. And so if it's a conventional loan, use the appraisal waiver and choose option 2 or even option 1 if you're comp supported. So option 1 is a full waiver. It says if that home is $300,000 and my offer is $320,000, I'm paying $320,000. If the appraisal comes in at $280,000, I know that I have to come up with $40,000. Okay, that's a full and complete waiver. That's option 1. Option 2 is the one I like, which is I waive my right to get out based on the appraisal, and I'm going to pay what I offered, which in my case was $320,000, but it has to at least appraise for whatever amount you put in there. And I strongly suggest that amount be the sales price. And so by that, the understanding is that the house better be priced appropriately because this is the list price. And that's the price that I'm not going to go below. Okay, so it's got to appraise for at least the list price. I'm willing to pay 20 grand over, and that's option 2. So that makes a pretty strong offer. Okay, higher option fee. And I'm talking a lot higher, like $600, $700, $800. And think about this. They are taking their home off the market with the notion that that your buyer could back out for no reason between execution date and let's just say the next 7 days. Okay, so they should be compensated appropriately in this kind of market. And that's if your buyer really wants the home, right? So that does make a compelling offer. Put more cash down, provide proof of funds, and really this wins overall. And so why is that? Well, if you are bound by an FHA loan as an example, and you're only required to put down 2.5% or 3%, I would put down more if you can. And because the less the loan amount, the greater the chances of the loan going through and being approved. So that typically wins out all the time. Think of the other extreme, cash buyer, no loan at all, right? Cash buyer is a very, very, very compelling offer, right? So, but most people have to take out a mortgage. And so what's the best case scenario? A very low loan amount. Okay. You could agree to take as is, so no repairs. And your client's only exposure are what I call the big four: the roof, HVAC, hot water heater, and foundation. So in this scenario, they would agree that I'm going to take the home as is. I'm going to do an inspection because I want to know what I'm walking into, but I'm not going to ask you, the seller, to do any repairs. Okay. Now, the price tag of fixing these things is pretty high. So in exchange for an over ask sales price, maybe the buyer assumes the risk of having to replace the HVAC or having to replace the roof. I mean, a roof is 10 grand minimum. HVAC, same thing. So these are not small things to decide, but I think it would make your offer stronger. All right, and then seller credits. So I mentioned yesterday, and JC corrected me on this, and so I'm just going to walk through what I wrote down, and then I'll just kind of explain what JC's input was. But so seller credit. So when you think about what causes stress to a seller, it's usually the moving process, right? Everything they have to do all over again when they get to wherever they're going. And so could your buyer offer monetary compensation for things like moving expenses or housekeeping or landscaping or new furniture? And so, JC, I'll let you just kind of explain what your counter argument was to that.
Well, so when offering anything within a contract, keep in mind it is a contract, and so whatever is there is binding. So if you mention anything like, "Hey, I'm going to pay for moving expenses," then an underwriter might look at that and say, "Hey, you know what? I want to see that the moving expenses were paid," and may ask for a receipt in some cases. So I would just try to be as vague as possible, saying, "Hey, we're going to provide $5,000 in buyer credits, seller credits, vice versa," and just keep it vague, because if you are very specific, an underwriter may come back and say, "Hey, I want to see receipts. I want to make sure that water heater was paid for, that moving truck was paid for," whatever the case may be.
Yeah, and to that end, you don't want to do anything outside of closing either, and so that's the big no-no. So so when you talk about how much moving costs and how much landscaping costs, it's several $1,000s. And so the other thought was, do you offer to pay the seller's title policy? Because that's going to be $3 grand probably right there. And so other things like that are big ticket items. Think of the final CD and the column that says seller expenses. Whatever you can defray from that column is going to play well. Okay. Now, the other thing is that you might be up against an inexperienced agent. So my point here was to call out what that money was going to go for. So per JC's commentary, I wouldn't, again, mention that it's for moving expenses or housekeeping or landscaping. But the buyer is always free to provide a credit to the seller in whatever, monetary way they want. So think about those things, whether it's a blanket $5,000 in JC's example, or if it is going to be absorbed because of you're going to buy the title policy, or you're going to purchase the home warranty, or any of those other costs that the seller is typically responsible for, that is going to provide a strong offer. Okay. And then I would strongly encourage you to convince your clients not to make offers on multiple homes. All right. And there are plenty of things that you can do in real estate, but there's plenty of things that you should not do. Right. And so this kind of falls into that area. And this, in my opinion, is walking in the gray, as JC likes to say. And here's my personal opinion. I think that when you think about, put yourself in the seller's shoes and think about that seller that I just mentioned that had 60 offers, and your buyer comes forward and that they've already put offers onto into other homes because you've done it for them. And the buyer says, well, that's cool. I'll take the risk. The seller doesn't know that. And the seller has in good faith chosen your offer, let's say, and only to find out that your buyer got a better offer from another home that they really wanted more, and they're going to withdraw their offer, or they're just going to lose their option fee. Okay, the consequences are often much greater than just losing an option fee or losing your earnest money. And so I think it's just duplicitous to do that, in my personal opinion. I think that the seller in good conscience is taking each offer as they come in, and they can't do that. I mean, the best they can do is take a backup offer. So they can't they can't execute multiple contracts, right? And so in my opinion, neither should the buyer. So I know that the buyers are desperate and they might ask you to do this. I would strongly encourage them not to do this, because guess who's going to have to keep track of who said what to who and what offers are in on what home? You guys. Okay. So before I go into the prospecting piece, any input or commentary on multiple offers? Okay. If you have any questions on any of this as it's happening in real life situations, please give me a call. All right. So let's talk about prospecting in a pandemic. So how has prospecting changed? Well, there's a lack of listings, right? And so that just means a lack of open houses. And that's detrimental, because when you want to speak to the motivated, they are the ones usually showing up at open houses. And so this is a problem. Interest rates are burning a hole in the pockets of buyers. They are being bombarded with sound bites that there's all this free money flying around, and 1% interest rates, 2% interest rates, you got a buyer. There's never been a better time to buy a home. And they are just chomping at the bit to spend their money. And so again, getting back to my first point, that breeds poor choices. Okay. But it also prevents an inability for us to get them into a home. Third thing is multiple offers, right? So it's just crazy out there with regards to how fast inventory is going and the multiple offer situation. And so then it's almost impossible to do any in-person prospecting. Okay, think of open houses, visiting expired listings, any kind of networking in person, hosting or sponsoring events. A lot of that has been shut down. It's very difficult to get in front of the motivated clients. And you can't do food deliveries or pop buys or anything like that. All right, so I kind of look at real estate prospecting in two buckets. One is short-term business, which is your low-hanging fruit, which is before the pandemic, open houses, FSBOs, and expired listings. They are the motivated. They've already, they're not kicking tires. They've already raised their hand and said, I want to buy or I want to sell my home. And so, and then the long term, which are the tire kickers, and they are people that you're going to ask for referrals from. Maybe it's not them that want to buy, but they know somebody. And so let's talk about the short-term solutions first. So I've done a class on Remine before. Remine is the application that you can have access to when you log on to netrust.net. And Remine has come a long way. It used to be a pay per use application to get people's contact information. That's not the case anymore. It's all free. And just to refresh your memory, think of a map of a neighborhood. And if you're going to draw a square around a certain subdivision, you can key in on the homes that are the most motivated. And how do they do that? Because they, as people are on real estate sites, whether they realize it or not, when they agree to their terms and conditions to search that site, they are giving other affiliate sites that search information. And that all matches back to their computer IP address. Okay. And Remine syncs all that data together. And if someone is on Zillow a lot or Realtor.com a lot, or they have an auto email coming from a real estate agent, their computer activity proves that they are likely to make a real estate transaction in the near future. Now, out of 150 homes, about 5 or 6 are going to meet that criteria that I just mentioned. But as I mentioned before in my video about Remine, I would sure like to not send out 150 postcards knowing that there's only 5 or 6 people that are truly motivated. So it saves you a lot of time and saves you a lot of money. And so it is as good as hosting an open house, because I would offer up that these folks may not even be going to those open houses anyway. And if they were, are they going to your open houses that you're hosting? So Remine is a gold mine, in my opinion. So if you are unsure about how to use it, please refer back to my video. It's not that difficult to figure out on your own, but the video is there to help you as well. Those are truly motivated people. And if they already own a home, then they're going to want to list it and buy a new home. Okay. Next are Zoom seminars to replace your in-person meetings. So when you think about seminars, are a great way to get a group of people in the same room pre-pandemic and capture a lot of leads. But because we can't do that today, we have to think about another way to do that. And so I think that, especially on a day like today, it's a lot easier to click on a Zoom link and consume some content than it is to bundle up and go out and, go to a meeting room in a local hotel to, learn about a VA loan as an example. And so I don't think the content is the hard part. It's marketing it and getting it out there so that people attend the seminar. Okay. But it can be done. And so these are some of the subjects that I would suggest you think about doing. You could do one on first-time home buyers, the military niche, affordable housing, senior housing, the millennial demographic. If any of you are bilingual, that is a great way to get leads. So low-hanging fruit there. And then lender and builder relationships. So there are surely people that fill out a loan application or visit a builder that are not represented. And the only way they are going to know that you are out there to represent them is to form and foster relationships with lenders and builders. And then reach outside our brokerage for any open houses, even if it means you have to drive away. So if you live in Fort Worth and the only open house available is in Irving or Plano, it's better than not attending an open house at all. So they're out there. They just have to be, you just have to kind of work a little bit harder to get them. Okay, so when I say reach out to my outside of the brokerage, what that means is look at the listings within the geographical area that you want to have an open house, and look for brokerages that are listing those homes that are not near you, because that is a high likelihood that that agent does not want to come out that far to host an open house. Now you might be saying, well, homes are flying off the market. There are no open houses, and that could be true. All that means, people are holding open houses. Are they in the amount that they were 6 months ago? No, but it just means you'll have to ask more people to get that open house. Okay. And then RPR. So log on to RPR, and there is a status for pre-foreclosures and foreclosures that might also be low-hanging fruit. Okay, these are going to be the truly motivated. All right, that status does exist in there. And then local leases. So place an ad, online or Craigslist or wherever that offers your services to help people either find an apartment or find a rental home. As I mentioned last time, I would do it within 5 miles of where you live because that can be a beat down, and there's not a big payout for leases. But that is great low-hanging fruit. And those leases sometimes turn into buyers, but if you do a good job with that lease, then they're going to tell other people. And those other people they might be leases too, but they also might be purchasers. So I think the rule of thumb is that, you know, do a good job with any client that you have, and that's gonna reap benefits. All right. And I would still visit expires and FSBOs, but simply leave a packet of info to review. So if people are hesitant about answering their door, there's nothing wrong with leaving a packet of information there. They are going to know why you stopped by. I guarantee it. And so then a word about FSBO. So they have to be just pulling their hair out during this time. So my normal pitch to FSBOs was, do you know that you have to provide a seller's disclosure? Do you know how in writing to communicate how you're going to pay the buyer's agent? And oh, by the way, how are you coordinating showings? How do you know that the buyer is qualified? Well, the simple chore of coordinating the showings has got to be driving them up a wall, because all they have in the yard is their sign and their cell phone number, which must be blowing up with the amount of people that want to see their home. So that creates stress in an area that they have very little knowledge of. This has happened before, by the way, where sellers will dip their toe in the water, and if someone wants to offer them $50,000 above ask, they'll sell their home, but they're not going to, you know, waste money with a real estate agent. They'll do it themselves. Well, in today's market, that can prove very stressful and very risky for them, because buyers are probably just coming at them nonstop. So I think FSBOs more than ever need our assistance. So don't be afraid to get in front of them. They are the motivated. All right, so long-term solutions. These are really for people that already know, like, and trust you. So the simple thing is work by referral. You know, there is no better lead than one that comes from someone that already knows, likes, and trusts you. So the only reason people refer other people for anything is because it makes them look good and feel good. Hate to burst your bubble, but that's why I never buy into when a realtor tells me, well, I'll try that, but everyone knows a realtor. And yes, they do. They probably know 50. I know a ton of inspectors. I recommend one. I know a ton of real estate photographers. I recommend one, because I know their work and I can rely on them. And I know that when they take a job, they're gonna make me look good. Okay. And that is usually the only reason why they're recommending you. Okay. So look at our follow-up program, which is under business building on our website. It is the slow and steady wins the race process of staying in front of people, and it tells you what to send, when to send it, how to send it. Okay. Exploit the heck out of your database and systematically stay in touch. All right. So if you don't have a database, you need to get one. If you have one, which is nothing more than a group of names that you can reach out to, then this is the time to ask them for business. I sent out the Prospects Plus template last week. JC also has one. Both are on our website, but it serves to create structure and to keep you organized. Okay. But there has to be a systematic way that you're reaching out to people every day, every week. Right? Be the neighborhood expert. Okay. Wherever you live, that is where you should be most familiar. So choose 25 to 50 neighbors and do a mail campaign. And you don't have to order stuff. You can do a note card. You can do a CMA. You can do whatever. Just get something in front of your neighbors so they know, they connect you with being the neighborhood expert, and you may catch someone at the right place at the right time. Okay, start or join a Facebook group, and this is in the spirit of staying relevant. Okay, this is not a guarantee because this is a crowded space, but the more you can insert your guidance and opinions as a licensed realtor, the more you're going to be looked upon as the expert. Okay, choose 10 other realtors each week to reach out to for referrals. So again, if you live in Fort Worth, look at Plano, look at out-of-state agents, look at California, all the states that are moving here. You can get all that on RPR. You can get all that on Zillow. just do a find an agent, Los Angeles, and start sending stuff to them. They're going to think you're crazy, but they're going to remember you when someone says, hey, I'm moving to Texas. Do you know anybody there that can help me? Well, yeah, as a matter of fact, I just got an email from somebody. Let me reach out to him or her. And so if you choose 10 a week, that's a lot. That's a lot every year. You're going to get something from that. All right. Adopt a senior. So this is kind of out there, but you know, the senior demographic has been isolated more than I think any other demographic out there. And so depending on where they are and what stage in life they are, they also might be looking at transitional housing. So it is a great way to give back and do something for a segment of the population that is right now feeling very lonely and isolated. But I think it can also lead to leads as well. Okay. And then lastly, live up to the reputation you think you have. Do you think you're responsive? Do you think you're available? Do you think you're professional? Whatever those qualities that you hang your hat on, you got to live it out, right? And so nothing gets a recommendation or a referral more than proof that you are these things. All right. So the secrets to this whole deal is, become familiar with the technology. So if you don't know much about RPR or you don't know much about Remine, I mean, the 2 hours that you spend, if that, figuring it out is going to equal a lifetime of referrals. If you become an expert in those two systems, you'll be able to leverage that technology to your advantage pretty quickly. All right. So don't be afraid of the technology. Create the system and stick to it. So that means determine from where you're going to get business, create that system, and stick to it. Okay, dedicate 2 hours minimum every day to prospecting for new business. Set a weekly goal of touches and track, meaning a weekly goal of how many people you're going to reach out to. And that could be email, it could be, doesn't have to be face-to-face, but it's important to set that goal and track it. And then prepare for your next day the day before, so you can hit the ground running. So if you start your day at 8 or 9, whatever, you know exactly what you're going to be doing. The worst thing you can do is sit down and not know what you need to be doing that day. Okay. At a minimum, have an email campaign and your one-page resume done. So under our marketing tab, I have the one-page resume already made for you. You just have to insert your picture and your contact information. That is your calling card. That is your business card on steroids. It's what you put in to buyer and seller packets. Okay. Under marketing, I also have graphics for an email campaign. So you just need to cut and paste it in there and start sending that out to your contacts. You can do it manually or use MailChimp or another system that you might find better. All right. And then have buyer and seller packets pre-made. So if you did all this and someone actually called you and said, yeah, my spouse and I are looking to buy in the next 3 months, can you help me? Would you be able to give them anything that would guide them through that process, and at the same time tell them who you are and why they should hire you? Okay, so have 2 or 3 of those made. It will also structure and get clear in your own mind what the process is for both buyer and seller. Okay, so that was it for prospecting. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts or concerns about anything that we went through today? No? Okay, well, be on your guard. You're going to be caught off guard with this market. Buyers and sellers are going to ask you to do a whole bunch of things that you may not know is correct or not. So so please reach out to me and ask me. Just as a side note, I am taking the 17 Code of Ethics articles as prescribed by the National Association of Realtors. And instead of reviewing them, in addition to reviewing them during these kinds of meetings, I'm going to do a video on each of them as well, so that I can kind of unpack some examples of what they're talking about. So all you need to do is just kind of click on the video and go through them. It's important. We are bound by the Code of Ethics, the TREC rules, and MLS rules as well. So there's a lot that we are accountable for. I'll be the first to admit that I'm not as familiar with all those rules as I should be. And so, so that's my commitment to you guys. I'll do some videos on those just so that it's more easily accessible. So, but awesome. Well, in my absence next week, I'll be on vacation Monday through Sunday. Brian and Melinda Stitzinger are going to be your point of contact. I will send out their information so that if you get stuck, you can ring them up and ask them questions. But I will be back in the saddle that following Monday. So anyway, other than that, have a great rest of the week and stay warm. And we'll talk to you guys later.
Thank you. Have a nice break.
Take care.
Brad.